Hey, and welcome back to another episode. Have you ever felt like that life just threw you into neutral? The engine's idling and you just don't know which gear to shift into? Well, you're not alone. And today we are talking to the guy who literally wrote the roadmap out of that situation, DJ Hefflin, author of Shifting Gears in the Crossroads. DJ is a CEO with over 40 years of experience building and scaling businesses across consumer products, heavy equipment, automotive and aerospace and defense manufacturing, environmental services, and advanced materials. His career includes leadership roles in greenfield startups, privately funded and private equity backed ventures, as well as Fortune 500 enterprises. DJ is committed to faith, family, and service. DJ has served in more than 35 ministry roles, focusing on teaching, leadership development, and building strong, purpose-driven communities. So, DJ, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tim, good to be with you. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. So we all just heard your incredible bio and everything that kind of leads up to this moment. But if, in your own words, can you tell us what is the motivation for writing your book, Shifting Gears at the Crossroads?
I want to help others, Tim. It's really what I've tried to do my entire personal life and professional career. I, like many people, have gone through several crossroads experiences, and I've had to shift gears professionally, personally, in career, in ministry, and in life. And as I've done that, I've learned how to work through a step-by-step process. The first time I did it was cumbersome and it was clunky and there was lots of failures or, unsettledness. But as I went through successive crossroads, I got better at the process, became a roadmap, and I figured this may be something I could share with other people. And that's what the motivation was behind writing the book. I basically codified my learnings as I've gone through some crossroads and I've seen others go through the crossroads. And I put it in the book so there could be a manual roadmap guide for others who are navigating their own crossroads to help them through life, career, ministry, business, so on and so forth.
Yeah, so you mentioned about the four F's in the book, and we're just going to jump right into it. So could you explain what the four F's are and why you put them in that order?
So the four F's in the book are what I call foundational elements or foundational blocks. I actually have an illustration that I show in the book. It's a Jenga model. If you know the game Jenga and you replace the elements of the blocks and you keep pulling blocks out until the structure collapses. Life's a lot like a Jenga. That's why I use the model. But the four foundational blocks are the base of my Jenga model. And it really boils down to, as you progress through life, how do you really measure success? How do you know if you've arrived or you've succeeded? I claim in the book that it's a function of achieving balance amongst the elements of faith and family and fitness and finances. And if you go through life and you experience tremendous success or perhaps tragic failure in one of those elements, it may not be the success you think it is, a failure you think it is, unless you've made sure that you haven't lost the other three elements in the process. So there are four foundational blocks. They're each critically important as we go through these crossroads and changes in life. The way I measure my progress and the way I describe it in the book through the colorful characters that I introduce is how they progress through these crossroads and how they balance those four critical areas of life. And I also argue if one of them gets removed, you move the wrong Jenga block, the whole model of your life can collapse or fall apart or require significant reconstruction. But they're foundational and they connect to what I later talk about in the book as vision and mission. Those are the overriding things that drive us. But these four elements really make the foundation, the stable part of the structure, as they do in our lives, our careers, and our ministries and our business.
So in your opinion, is there any one particular Jenga block of the four F's that are more important than the others, or do they all just kind of fit in there in a very neat way? Or is there a specific order of precedence in your opinion?
So they're equally balanced and they need to be balanced. I will tell you through my own experience, the faith block has gravitated to becoming the most important thing because I've realized that as I've traversed the challenges of life, even when your finances don't go the way you want them to, or your career, your health, even family, maybe you have internal or external struggles, things that put pressures on the family. I've found that the faith block is that go-to spot where you can come into a place of inward thought. You could reorder your thoughts. You could, faith means different things to different people. For me, it's a relationship with God, with Christ, a Judeo-Christian experience where I could communicate, internalize thoughts. And by doing that on a consistent basis, I could reorder and reconnect with the other areas of my life. And if one of them is the Jenga block that gets removed and collapses or creates instability, I can go back into that one area of faith and then find stability and order and the rest. But in the greater scheme of things, they're all important. And, what I talk about in the book is if I put too much emphasis in the finances area, that's where our career lies. And many of us do that. Many of us gain our own identity. We identify with what we do, not really who we are, not good, but we do. Sometimes a career fails, jobs end or businesses end, or something disruptive happens, like happens to the two of the three, all three characters I talk about in the book have some level of disruption. When that disruption occurs, where do you go to center yourself? And where do you go to create stability? Or where do you go to pull that back together again? And that's where the faith element brings it together. But faith is important. It's the cornerstone. But balance of family and fitness and finances become equally important as well.
No, I love that, how you put them all together and balance everything together, starting with faith. And you introduce your life strategy executive graph in the book. And I thought it was very interesting because you go from point A to point B, but point B looks like you're going backwards. So could you kind of explain that to folks who are reading it, or just take a look at it and go, oh, wait a minute, I don't want to go backwards?
So great question. If I had a visual here, I'd share it. But for those that are listening and watching, just in your mind, picture a regular XY axis and then put a big check mark in that XY axis. That's the curve or graph that Tim's talking about. In Shifting Gears in the Crossroads, I talk about 4 transformational phases that you can follow in order to go from a period of disruption to achieve what it is that you ultimately intend to set out and achieve, what you want to be and what you want to do. The reposition phase is where I spend most of the time talking about in the book, because it often is the most intensive, it's the most difficult, it many times takes the longest, and is the most critical for getting right to going forward. When you go through reposition, when there's a disruption, you lose your job, or you sell a business, you're an entrepreneur and you sell a business, you're ready to go do something else, or maybe you close a business or get acquired, or maybe you're in ministry and your focus changes, or the shift occurs and you're ready or not ready for it. You go through that disruption. Sometimes you have to go from point A to point B, and sometimes that does require a step back. And what happens to the characters in the book I talk about, Jim the entrepreneur, Ted the entrepreneur, give some of my own examples. And those disruptions, ironically, in order to get from that disrupted period to a place where they can then go forward, each one of them actually had to take a step back. And sometimes that means in career, you take a different job and you earn less money. Or maybe you lose status. You had a prestigious title or prestigious job, and to get where you want to get going on a different curve, you take a step back in status or position. That's okay, because if you think about that check mark, that's what Tim's talking about in the step back. But if you think about it in financial terms, I consider that step back an investment. If you think about investments, you invest money in a company, a stock, or whatever it is, because you think that that money is going to get paid back to you over time. It's the same thing in reposition. Sometimes you have to take a step back, make your investment, and realize that you're going to make the investment back, and then you're going to make more than what you invested. And that's how it's going to pan out for you in the long run. But that's the reason for the check mark. And what the graph looks back, and going from point A to point B often requires a step back. But I'll say this, and then I'll get off this, but that step back doesn't mean a setup for failure. I argue in the book that's set up can be a setup for success, not a disruptive event for your failure. And that's the point of shifting gears in the crossroads.
Yeah. So I think about reconsolidating gains when you talk about point B in your repositioning phase on there. And so with that, how can we anticipate a disruption or know if a disruption is coming? Or do you think it just happens and we have to react?
Great question. I tried to get some data as I was writing the book that really would articulate that for me. The closest thing I could come up with is in the financial industry and the wealth management area where folks have studied, do people have financial resources enough to sustain a disruption? You lose your job. How long can you go without income before you dip into savings, you do something else? What I found is about 20% of people have enough resources to sustain a 6-month or greater disruption in their income, if you think about it in job terms. Ironically, when I look back over my own experience in my life, and then those who I've observed that I refer to in the book, pretty close. Only about 2 in 10 people are really ready for a disruption. That means 8 out of 10 aren't. And I got to tell you, I wasn't always in the 2 out of 10. In my first few transitions, I wasn't ready for the transitions. My first one, I didn't see it coming. And when it happened, I was all of a sudden on the outside looking into something that I created, and I was lost. And many people are in that situation when they see it coming. So I'll tell you that Very few people are ready for it. Even fewer people see it coming. If 2 in 10 people are even ready for it, less than that are going to really be ready to see it coming. I don't have any data or statistics, but I can tell you in my own experience, I wasn't ready, and most people aren't.
Yeah. So besides reading Shifted Gears, what is something that we could do to kind of anticipate that a shift might be coming, like a disruption period might be coming? Because as I've talked to folks over the last several years, we're entering into a highly disruptive period in the economy, in the workforce, with the introduction of AI, with the introduction of 3D printing, where your traditional sources come from different places. And how can we anticipate some of the shifts coming in the disruption period?
I think there's several areas that we have to keep our finger on the pulse. I think certainly looking at current events is an obvious starting place, and you can look at sociopolitical changes, economic changes that are happening now and are happening in the future. Those are great sources of introspection as you're looking into the future and then thinking about, how does this affect me? How does it affect my family? The other thing that I have learned to do, and I wasn't ready when I first went through my first transition, is really pay close attention to the things that are happening in your daily life. Look at your job, look at your career, look at your company, the one you work for or the one that you've started and are managing if you're an entrepreneur. What are the economic trends there? What are the sales trends? What are the marginal trends that are happening? Are you converting revenue to equity down through the revenue to EBITDA down through the business? Are there competitive things that competitors doing in the marketplace? Is there M&A going on? Are there folks that are lowering price to be more competitive? Or they're rolling out new products? I mean, those are ways that you can be forward thinking and forward looking in a career or in a business, and personally is probably the most difficult when you deal with your personal relationships. What are the quality of the relationships around you? Quality relationships inside the family. Are you spending enough time with the family? Are you feeling fulfilled and enriched? Is it healthy? Is it productive? Is it growing? Is it care filled and participative? Or is there drifting? Is there gaps? Is there communication blocks? And those are things that you can look into, less empirical, a little bit more sensing and feeling rather than, using data to drive the trends. But when you think about the 4 foundational blocks, each one of them has key critical indicators that you can watch either empirically or through a sensing feeling aspect to know what's coming in those areas, and then holistically what's coming all along. Again, I didn't do that. And when I look back at my first transition, if I'd have done those things, I would have seen it coming. Doesn't mean I would have avoided the transition, but I would have had a better plan in place and I would have been more ready for it than I was when it happened.
So, drawing on your own past experience, can you draw upon like one instance or one shifting gear area that caught you by surprise? And it was like, you know what? I made this mistake and I'm never going to make this mistake again.
So I tell the story about Jim, the entrepreneur in the book. And the way I introduce him is through a wake-up call and a disruption that he has. I can tell you that I experienced the same thing in my own life, which is why I could identify with the story of Jim so much. It was the business that I was an entrepreneur. And today, if you ask me, I'll tell you I'm an entrepreneur turned entrepreneur within existing companies, still do the same things, just in a different environment. And, I was working on a fresh startup company that I had a handful of colleagues and partners. We all worked together. It wasn't a one-man show. It was a collective team event, and 0 to $5 million